네, 안녕하세요. 낭독 방송을 해보도록 하겠습니다. 낭독 예습입니다. 네, 예습. 내일 Day 30 부분이고요. Page 90, 91, and 92까지 되겠습니다. 읽고 있는 책은 Laurel Doll, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory 이게 되겠습니다. 자, 그러면 제가 공유를 해보고요. 네, 복사 공유를 하고 바로 읽도록 하겠습니다. 네. 라니님 또 오늘 수고 많으셨습니다. 라니님 조금 전에 방송을 막 맞추셔가지고요. 제가 응원의 메시지를 보내드렸습니다. 이거를 공유를 하려고 했는데 못하게 돼가지고 그러면 그대로 해보겠습니다. 공유는 나중에 하겠습니다. 자, 여기 읽어볼게요. Something had to give. Something did give, and that something was Augustus. Woof! Up he shot again like a bullet in the barrel of a gun. 이게 shot이 되겠네요. shot. shoot이 아니고 dictionary shot 맞죠? shot. Up he shot again like a bullet in the barrel of a gun. He's disappeared, yelled Mrs. Gloop. Where does that pipe go to? Quick, call the fire brigade. 요거는 또 처음 들어본다네요. brigade. 딕셔너리 보면은 brigade. 영국식 표현인 것 같기도 하고 요거 한번 내일 또 같이 나눠보면 좋을 것 같아요. brigade. Keep calm, cried Mr. Wonka. Keep calm, my dear lady, keep calm. There's no danger whatsoever. Augustus had gone on a little journey, that's all. A most interesting little journey. But he will come out if it's just fine. You wait and see. How can he possibly come out just fine? Snapped Mrs. Gloop. He will be made into marshmallows in 5 seconds. Impossible, cried Mr. Wonka. Unthinkable, inconceivable, absurd. He could never be made into marshmallows. And why not, may I ask? Shouted Mrs. Gloop. Because that pipe doesn't go to the marshmallow room, Mr. Wonka answered. It doesn't go to anywhere near it. That pipe, one Augustus went up, happens to lead directly to the room where I make a most delicious kind of strawberry-flavored chocolate-coated fudge. Then he'll be made into strawberry-flavored chocolate-coated fudge, screamed Mrs. Gloop. My poor Augustus! They'll be selling him by the pound all over the country tomorrow morning. Quite right, said Mr. Gloop. I know I'm right, said Mrs. Gloop. It's beyond a joke, said Mr. Gloop. Mr. Wonka doesn't seem to think so, cried Mrs. Gloop. Just look at him. He's laughing his head off. How dare you laugh like that when my boy's just gone up the pipe? You monster, she shrieked, pointing her umbrella at Mr. Wonka as though she were going to run him through. You think it's a joke, do you? You think that sucking my boy up into the fudge room like that is just one great big colossal joke. He will be perfectly safe, said Mr. Wonka, giggled slightly. He will be chocolate fudge. He will be chocolate fudge, shrieked Mrs. Gloop. Never, cried Mr. Wonka. Of course he will, shrieked Mr. Gloop. I won't allow it, cried Mr. Wonka. And why not? Shrieked Mr. Gloop. Because the taste would be terrible, said Mr. Wonka. Just imagine it, Augustus, flavored chocolate, coated Gloop. No one would buy it. They most certainly would, cried Mr. Gloop indignantly. I don't want to think about it, shrieked Mr. Gloop. Nor do I, said Mr. Wonka, and I do promise you, madame, that your darling boy is perfectly safe. If he's perfectly safe, then where is he? Snapped Mrs. Gloop. Lead me to him this instant. Mr. Wonka turned around and clicked his fingers sharply. Click, click, click 3 times. Immediately, an Oompa Loompa appeared, as if from nowhere, and stood beside him. The Oompa Loompa bowed and smiled, showing beautiful white teeth. His skin was rosy white, his long hair was golden brown, and the top of his head came just above the height of Mr. Wonka's knee. He wore the unusual deerskin slug over his shoulder. Now listen to me, said Mr. Wonka, looking down at the tiny man. I want you to take Mrs. and Mr. Gloop up to the fudge room and help them to find their son Augustus. He will just gone up the pipe. The Oompa Loompa took one look at Mrs. Gloop and exploded into purrs of laughter. Oh, do be quiet, said Mr. Wonka. Control yourself. Pull yourself together. Mr. Gloop doesn't think it's all that funny. 네, 여기까지 내일 읽어보는데요. 네, 처음 읽어보가지고 조금 버벅된 부분이 있습니다. 그래도 연습을 했기 때문에 내일 또 다시 읽으면서 같이 이야기 나눠볼게요.